The marble lobby of a five-star hotel is infused with the lingering fragrance of expensive perfume, as hurried footsteps traverse the marble floor and neon lights reflect off the glass facades of towering buildings. Music reverberates from luxurious bars. Emma entered the Grand Lexington Hotel wearing a crimson silk dress that accentuated her figure. She walked with a level of assurance that caused the world to stop and observe her. She was in town for the annual International Advertising Conference where she served as creative director. However, Emma's thoughts were not preoccupied with business tonight, because she was aware that he would be present. Adrian, the individual who once caused her heartbreak. Her former partner. The one she never quite recovered from, despite the 3 years that had passed since their separation. Even with a marriage, he waits silently and coldly for her to return home. Emma immediately recognized him upon entering the opulent ballroom. Adrian's attire remained unchanged, a black shirt with an open collar, no tie, and towering, slightly tousled curls. That calm, enigmatic glint was present in his eye. Time appeared to be frozen for a brief instant as their gazes locked. Adrian lifted his champagne goblet in a silent toast from across the room, tilting his head with a faint smile. Emma's heart beat irregularly. An invitation was unnecessary. Adrian leaned toward her ear and murmured, "I have a room." After a few glasses of wine, a handful of uncomfortable small talk, and a coincidental brush of hands in the hallway. The 18th deck. Emma hesitated for only a moment. However, the intense and sweltering heat in his eyes enticed her to escape the weight of reality and the maze of duty and remorse. The door to room 1807 was closed behind them. The first to move was Adrian, who was undoubtedly speechless. He drew her in by sliding his hand across the exposed skin of her back. Their lips met in a kiss that felt like 3 years of longing were suddenly released as their breaths mingled. Wild, despondent, and entangled in memory and desire. "I was missing you." Emma's hands were already tracing the familiar contours of his body as she gasped between lips. He softly muttered, pulling her dress down with a firm, deliberate motion. "I never stopped thinking about you." Skin came into contact with skin. The room was enveloped in heat. The rhythm of the bed's movement was accompanied by soft moans, an intimate melody intended for two spirits who had once loved, lost, and now reconnected in a fevered, forbidden moment. The hotel room was illuminated by a gentle, amber radiance. The windows were entirely isolated from the outside world by the thick curtains that encased them. Emma experienced the sensation of melting beneath Adrian's kisses. His lips began to trail down her neck and then slowly glided to her clavicle, a gentle yet searing sensation akin to a flame licking across her skin. His hands moved with purpose, caressing the smooth curve of her pelvis, sending electric shivers up her spine. He whispered, his voice husky, "You're still as soft as I remember." His breath was hot against her chest. Emma let out a gentle murmur, her fingers entangled in his hair, drawing him in closer. Their eyes met for only a brief moment, but it was sufficient to destroy any remaining semblance of sanity. There are no additional inquiries. There will be no more moral boundaries. The only sounds were the heavier breaths and the perfect rhythm of the movements, as if their bodies had belonged to each other in a previous existence. Adrian tenderly lifted Emma into his arms and placed her on the bed, which was covered in crisp white sheets. He swiftly removed his shirt, revealing a firm, toned body, and her red dress now lay disheveled on the floor. His chest was pressed against hers, and it was hot, weighty, and resonant with years of unspoken yearning. The trail of his kisses extended from her neck to her breasts, from her midsection to the inside of her thighs, causing Emma to tremble with each contact. She murmured his name in a plea, "Adrian." He lowered himself, his mouth instinctively and hungrily contacting her. They synchronized their movements in a primordial, urgent, and slow rhythm. Emma arched with each thrust, her nails grazing his back, leaving red markings behind. Moans were intermingled with the creaking of the mattress and the sound of skin on skin, creating a primal, sensual music that reverberated throughout the private chamber. This symphony was intended for their exclusive enjoyment. Emma was further devastated with each successively deeper stroke. She was no longer the woman of ritual and restraint, nor was she the exhausted wife in a tranquil marriage. She was herself, as she was entirely immersed in the pleasure and lost in the ecstasy of the past and present colliding. Each time they shifted positions, pressing against the wall, straddling on the velvet settee, and then returning to the bed, they unlocked a new aspect of desire. Emma buried her face into Adrian's neck, muffling the moans she could no longer suppress as Adrian murmured rough, compassionate words into her ear. Ultimately, they collapsed beside one another, their skin still damp with sweat and their breath still unsteady, as wave after wave of delight crested and ebbed. Adrian wrapped his arm around her from behind, as if in a silent vow, and pulled the comforter over their entwined bodies. He inquired, his voice scarcely more than a breath, "Do you regret it?" Emma maintained her silence for an extended period. She then turned to him, her eyes glistening with emotion, and murmured, "No. I merely wish that it had not been too late." The following morning, sunlight penetrated the curtain slits, enveloping the exposed skin with a golden glow that was still reeking of the previous night's fragrance. Adrian's arm was draped around Emma's waist, providing her with the same comfort as a dream that had not yet dissipated as she awoke. She quietly rose from her bed and entered the bathroom, feeling the cold water surge over her as if it were attempting to cleanse her of the events that had transpired. However, it was unsuccessful. Adrian's face was serene, resembling that of a child, when she returned to the chamber. She sat beside him, tenderly brushing her fingers along his cheek, and then began gathering her clothes. The conference continued today, and she knew she had to revert to the role of the poised, successful wife. The clock on the nightstand read just before 9 a.m. However, upon Emma's exit from the hotel room, time stood still. Lucas, her spouse, was situated in the hallway, a mere few steps away. He was dressed in a suit that was as impeccable as ever, but his countenance was devoid of emotion. In a manner that chilled her to the core, his eyes fixed on hers not in a threatening or furious manner, but rather in a serene manner. Emma's lips parted, but she was unable to speak. She stood motionless. Her heart pounded violently in her chest. He had never before given her that expression, as if he had witnessed everything. She whispered, "Lucas." He approached her at a leisurely pace, his gaze remaining unwavering. "The event is being hosted by this hotel," he stated, his voice as keen as a blade and low. "It is sponsored by my company." Before proceeding, he briefly hesitated. "And the room you just exited, that's the one I reserved for you. I was aware that you would not be sleeping in yours last night." Emma's complexion became paler. She inquired, her voice quivering, "You were aware of everything?" A slight assent was given by Lucas, who then reached into his suit pocket and extracted an antiquated phone, the one she believed she had misplaced. "I suspect that you may have overlooked the fact that it was still synchronized with iCloud." He touched the screen and maintained it in place. A sequence of security camera images depicting her and Adrian entering the hotel. Then, old messages, intimate and incriminating, were completely preserved, line by line. Emma experienced the sensation of the ground disappearing beneath her feet. Lucas gazed at her for an extended period, his eyes devoid of any tenderness. "I do not fault you for experiencing a certain emotion," he stated. "However, I will never forget the fact that you deceived me in my presence." He presented her with a compact envelope containing divorce documents that had already been signed. "I arrived solely to ensure that you were unable to return." Lucas then turned and strolled away without a glance back. Emma was frozen in the foyer of the luxury hotel, torn between two worlds, one of scorching desire and one of shattered reality. Adrian continued to slumber behind the door. Ahead, Lucas had vanished. And in the middle stood Emma, exposed, adrift, and confronting the devastation she had inflicted upon herself. "Like what you heard. There's plenty more heartbreak and secrets to come." Hit like, subscribe, and stay curious with Tangled Truths.